My name is Seraphina Vale, and from the moment I could speak, I knew I wasn't welcome. My mother used to keep a photo album in the living room. It was leather-bound, thick with glossy memories. Holidays, birthdays, ballet recitals. But if you looked closely, I was always slightly out of frame. Cropped at the shoulder, half-turned, blurry. Like the camera itself couldn't bear to capture me. "You just weren't expected," my mother would say whenever I asked why I wasn't in the baby pictures. It was a surprise, a complicated time. She said it like she was forgiving me for existing. My younger sister Celia, on the other hand, was the miracle baby. Blonde curls, ocean blue eyes, a voice like a Disney cartoon. She had a nursery painted soft yellow with lamb decals and a canopy crib, documented from the day she kicked in the womb. When I was 5, Celia got a full princess-themed birthday party with live ponies. That same year, I got a sheet cake in the kitchen and a reminder to clean up my wrapping paper. We lived in a 2-story house in Windermere, Indiana. Not rich, but comfortably upper middle. Dad worked in finance, Mom stayed home. From the outside, we were textbook suburban stability, lawn manicured within regulation, Christmas lights evenly spaced, and a mailbox polished like silverware. Inside, it was all performance. My father didn't yell, he didn't hit. His discipline was the silence of ceilings, high, cold, and out of reach. If you disappointed him, he wouldn't look at you for days. No words, no dinner table presence, just an absence that grew louder every hour. A kind of ghosting you don't recover from. "You're too much," he once told me when I asked for help with my science project. "Too intense. Let people breathe." What I heard was, "Don't be seen." Celia was everything I wasn't. In 3rd grade, she faked an asthma attack so she wouldn't have to take a math quiz. My parents picked her up from school and took her out for ice cream. I found out later from her Instagram story, where she captioned a selfie with whipped cream on her nose. "Lowell faked a flare. Worth it." When I showed my mom, her only response was, "Don't be a tattletale. Nobody likes a narc." I stopped showing her anything after that. My sanctuary was school. Teachers loved me, not because I was charming, but because I was competent. I read Shakespeare in middle school, tutored upperclassmen in chemistry, and led the debate team to state semifinals by sophomore year. But even then, every accomplishment felt like screaming into a canyon. One afternoon, I brought home a state medal. My mom glanced up from folding towels. "Is that why you were late?" I nodded. "Yeah, we won 3rd place at the regional." She cut me off with a tight smile. "That's nice, but don't make this your whole personality. Nobody likes a girl who brags." Celia came in seconds later with a B- on her algebra test and was rewarded with sushi takeout. The imbalance wasn't just emotional, it was financial too. When I was awarded a scholarship to a summer science program at Northwestern, I was ecstatic. Full ride, once in a lifetime. I printed out the acceptance letter and handed it to my mom, practically shaking. She read it over breakfast and nodded. "Oh, honey, we can't do this right now. Celia needs braces. We'll talk next year." "But it's covered," I said, confused. "The scholarship covers tuition," she snapped. "Not the bus fare, not the clothes, not the incidentals. We're not made of money." 2 weeks later, Celia got $800 hair extensions for prom. I paid for my own school supplies from babysitting money and started hoarding scholarships like lifeboats on the Titanic. The shift came slow, then sudden. It was the beginning of senior year, and I'd been saving to apply out of state. Columbia, Duke, maybe even Stanford. Anywhere that wasn't Indiana. One night, I stayed late for a debate prep session. When I got home, I found Celia filming in my bedroom. Lights, makeup, a full TikTok set. My bookshelf had been replaced with a ring light. "Get out," I said, shaking. Celia didn't even flinch. "Mom said I could have it. You weren't using it." "You have your own room." "Not with natural lighting," she scoffed. When I turned to my parents, Mom shrugged. "She needs space for her brand, Seraphina. Be supportive." "Where am I supposed to sleep?" She handed me a pile of sheets. The laundry room's clean. That was the moment. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just ice. I set the sheets down, went to my old desk, the one now covered in lip gloss and selfie sticks, and took back one item, my journal. That night, under the hum of the dryer, I didn't cry. I wrote. Wrote everything I'd ever swallowed. Every slight, every silence, every scene. Because I realized then that if they wouldn't love me for who I was, I'd make them remember me for what I'd become. And they wouldn't see it coming. Ever had a moment where your silence finally broke? You're not alone. 3 weeks after the laundry room exile, something in me shifted. Not with fury, but with direction. Every morning before school, I passed Celia's new studio, where my bookshelves now held LED lights and ring cameras. Sometimes she'd be in the middle of a live stream, posing in front of the wall I used to tape college brochures to. "Don't slam the washer door," she would call out mid-smile. "My mic picks up everything." So I slammed it harder. I spent my days in silence, but not in surrender. In my AP Psych class, we covered family systems theory, how some kids are assigned the scapegoat role to preserve dysfunction in the family. I remember staring at the whiteboard, where the teacher had written, "The problem child isn't always the problem." I copied that phrase into my journal, underlined it, then wrote, "So what happens when the scapegoat stops playing along?" College became my obsession, not for status, but for survival. I narrowed my list to 3: Columbia, UCLA, and NYU. Schools far enough away to make weekend visits inconvenient. I filled out essays with a kind of surgical clarity, detailing my academic goals with just enough personal story to stir admissions boards, but not enough to feel exposed. One night, Dad walked in while I was reviewing my Common App. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You applying for scholarships again?" "Yeah," I said, not looking up. "Tuition doesn't pay itself." He exhaled sharply, as if the weight of my independence was an affront. "You know, not everything in life has to be about achievement. Sometimes people just want you to be normal." I looked him in the eye for the first time in days. "Define normal." He didn't answer. Just left the room and muttered, "Smart mouth." The break came during a parent-teacher night. My calculus teacher, Mr. Levinson, had invited parents for a showcase of top students. I was asked to present a proof I'd developed, something that had already caught attention at state-level math contests. I prepped for hours. On the night of, I stood at the whiteboard, scanning the crowd. Rows of parents with cameras, claps, whispers. No one from my family. Afterward, Mr. Levinson pulled me aside. "They didn't come again, huh?" I shook my head, swallowing down a tide. He paused. "Seraphina, you ever think maybe it's not about you? That some people are just built wrong?" I nodded, too fast. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came when I got home and found the family in the living room, watching Celia's new TikTok where she reacted to a trending audio while dressed as a cowgirl. It had hit 30K views. Mom turned to me and said, "Can you believe she went viral again?" Not a word about the showcase. That night, I took every college rejection letter from underclassmen years, each one I'd kept to remind myself of growth, and I burned them in the backyard grill. I watched the flames twist around their empty promises, knowing I had no room left for fear. If they wanted to erase me from their story, I'd write my own, and make sure it couldn't be ignored. 2 weeks later, I won the Presidential Scholars nomination from the state of Indiana. One of only 2 high school seniors selected that year. When I told my mother, she blinked at me over her coffee. "That's federal, right? Is there money involved?" "It's one of the highest honors a student can get. It's national recognition." "But does it help with your FAFSA?" That was the end of the conversation. I did cry that night, in private. But not for them. For the girl I used to be. The one who still hoped for applause from ghosts. Twist. A week after that, I found out Celia had applied for an influencer scholarship to NYU's digital arts program, using part of my essay, my metaphor, my story. Word for word. She had pulled it from my saved drive on the home desktop. When I confronted her, she looked up from her phone and shrugged. It's not like you even believe in being emotional. I just made it sound better. I told my parents. Dad said, "It's just college. Don't be dramatic." Mom added, "She's creative. You should be flattered." That was the line. The point of no return. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just filed a plagiarism report with the scholarship board and began documenting everything. Every text, every email, every manipulative comment. Quietly, methodically, like preparing evidence for a trial that hadn't begun yet. Because I'd realized something vital. They had trained me to be invisible. Now I would become undeniable. Ever been told to be less of yourself just to keep the peace? The morning after I filed the plagiarism report, I woke to the sound of Celia sobbing downstairs. She said I stole it. Her voice cracked through the thin walls. She said I stole her story. I just borrowed it. Dad's voice was calm, like always. She's just bitter. Let it pass. Mom. I'll talk to the board. We'll say it was a shared essay. They're sisters. It's easy to confuse. I didn't come down. I sat in the laundry room, folded on the floor, clutching my laptop like it was armor. I felt nothing. No victory, no vindication. Just a hollow click, like the first turn of a safe combination. Something opening, but not yet revealing. Over the next week, the air in the house changed. Tighter, brittle. Celia wasn't subtle with her passive aggression. Loud sighs, slammed doors. Some people, she said once over dinner, need to stop pretending they're saints. No one contradicted her. But the most telling sign? My father, always the silent shadow, started offering unsolicited praise. "Nice job on that exam," he said one evening, not looking up from his Wall Street journal. I blinked. "Thanks." Then he added, "I mean, it's not viral content, but still." It was the equivalent of being stabbed with a compliment. By midwinter, I was accepted to Columbia with a full merit ride and an early research assistant position. It was everything I had worked for, everything they said would never happen without their help. I didn't tell them, not right away. I waited until a Sunday brunch, Celia's celebration for hitting 100K followers. My parents had rented out a brunch loft downtown, full of fake greenery and gold-accented signage that read, "Blessed." Celia was wearing a white jumpsuit. Everyone was taking photos. I waited until she cut her cake, red velvet with edible glitter, and then quietly slipped the Columbia acceptance letter under my mother's mimosa glass. She blinked down at it. "What's this?" "Early acceptance," I said simply. "I leave in August." The table went silent. Celia's fork clinked against her plate. My father adjusted his collar. "New York? Isn't that a bit much?" "It's Ivy League," I replied. "They pay me to go." My mother looked like someone had slapped her. Celia narrowed her eyes. "Why would you wait until now to tell us?" I smiled. "I didn't want to steal your spotlight." Later that night, as we drove home in silence, my mother finally spoke. "You're not too good for us, Seraphina." I never said I was. "But that's how you act." I turned to her. "No, I act like someone who's survived you." In the months leading up to graduation, I built the foundation of my exit. Bank account, housing forms, contact lists, medical records. Quietly, cleanly. And I began compiling everything I had. Audio from years past, screenshots, messages, even a journal entry Celia had once posted, then deleted about faking anxiety to skip a test. Not for public use, not yet. But for insurance. Because I wasn't just leaving, I was learning how to protect myself from them. One Friday in April, I got a text from Celia. "We need to talk. Urgent." I didn't reply. 2 hours later, she showed up at school, makeup streaked, eyes red. "Can we talk?" she asked. We sat on a bench by the faculty lot. She took a breath. "I didn't mean for it to get so bad. I don't know why I hate you sometimes. You make me feel invisible." I stayed silent. She wiped her eyes. "You're better than me, okay? Smarter. Everyone knows it, but they love me more. And I hate that. It's like, I'm not allowed to just be me without feeling like I'm stealing something from you. I stared at her. You did steal from me. I know, but I'm sorry. She reached into her bag and handed me a folded letter. Her own admission of what she did, signed and dated. I don't want this to define me, she said. I took the letter. Not because I forgave her, but because I knew one day it would define her more than she realized. New York wasn't just a city. It was permission. Permission to breathe, to be unknown, to shed the invisible barbed wire of my past, like an old, unwanted coat. I arrived 2 weeks before freshman orientation, staying in a sublet near Harlem. My roommate was a philosophy grad student named Dahlia, who barely spoke unless she was ranting about Nietzsche or reheating Thai leftovers, which suited me perfectly. No expectations, no comparisons, just space. But freedom doesn't silence the echoes. One morning, I was brushing my teeth when I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and for a split second, I flinched. Not at my reflection, but at how I still expected to see their disapproval behind me. It was muscle memory, trauma disguised as instinct. Later that week, I walked into Columbia's administrative office to finalize my work-study placement and found my hands trembling as I filled out the paperwork. You okay? The woman behind the counter asked, her tone genuinely warm. I nodded. Just adjusting. She smiled. Everyone does. It's not just a school, it's a resurrection. That word stayed with me all day, resurrection. My work-study assignment was at the university's psychological research lab, mostly data entry and transcription for doctoral candidates. But every now and then, I got to sit in on interviews, anonymous case studies about childhood trauma and resilience. That's where I met Professor Jane Mendez, sharp-eyed, silver-haired, with a voice like carved mahogany. She taught developmental psych and had once worked with trauma victims in post-conflict zones. You have that look, she said the first time we spoke. What look? The look of someone who's done her own excavation. She didn't ask questions. She gave space. But one day, she left a book on my desk, The Body Keeps the Score. Inside, a sticky note. Don't forget, survival is a skill, but healing is a choice. By October, I had made exactly one friend. Mateo. He was a first-generation Mexican-American lit major with tattoos of mythological symbols and a laugh that could melt bricks. We met at a seminar on narrative therapy and bonded over our mutual love for rage music and quiet cafes. I don't trust people who peaked in high school, he said once. I raised an eyebrow. You mean Celia? She your villain? No, I said. She's the dress rehearsal. He grinned. So what's the show? I didn't answer, but inside, I was already writing the script. Meanwhile, back in Indiana, something started shifting. I got an email from my mother. Your father's in the hospital, chest pain. They think it might be stress-related. We're handling it, but just thought you should know. Mom, no greeting, no signature, just an obligation disguised as information. I stared at the screen for a long time, then closed the tab. 2 days later, she emailed again. Not even a reply? I finally responded. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope he recovers. Let me know when he's stable. She replied within minutes. So cold. So detached. Is this who you've become? I didn't answer. But inside, something twisted. Not guilt, not pity, just weight. A pull. Like the past tightening its fingers around my throat. I brought it up with Professor Mendez. Is it wrong, I asked, to not feel anything? She leaned back in her chair, thoughtful. It's not wrong to feel numb. It's often safer than rage. But what if you want to feel rage? Then the question becomes, what will you do with it? A week later, Celia texted, Can we talk? I ignored it. She texted again the next day. It's about Dad. I called. Why now? I asked. She hesitated. Because he's not doing great, but also because I found something in Mom's drawer. What kind of something? A file about you, like detailed printouts, journals, screenshots, even some photos from your laptop you never posted. It's weird, creepy. I felt my blood turn to ice. Photos of what? You, working, studying, notes, your journal entries, like she'd been collecting. That was the moment. The moment where you realize the villain wasn't just passive aggressive. She was preparing something. I booked the next flight home, not to forgive, not to reconnect, but to recover the weapon someone else was building for my life. The moment my plane touched down in Indiana, I felt it. That cold recognition that some ghosts don't wait for permission. They meet you at the gate. Celia picked me up. She was wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big and sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. Her phone buzzed constantly, but she didn't look at it once. "You sure about this?" she asked, backing out of the airport parking lot. "I didn't come to visit," I said. "I came for the truth." She didn't argue. The house was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just finally seeing it without fear. The hedges were overgrown, the shutters faded, suburbia's illusion of control cracking at the edges. Inside, everything was in place. Two in place. The couch pillows perfectly aligned, magazines fanned out on the coffee table like no one had read them. It felt like a stage set waiting for the audience to arrive. My mother wasn't home. "At the hospital," Celia said. "Dad's stable, mild heart episode. They're keeping him overnight for observation." I nodded. "Show me the drawer." It was in the upstairs study, a locked file cabinet, bottom drawer. Celia pulled out a small envelope. "She's been hiding the key under her jewelry box." Inside were folders. Labeled, dated. S. Vale. Academic Trajectory S. Vale. Digital Footprint S. Vale. Journal Fragments S. Vale. Emotional Patterns 2018-2021. She had cataloged me like a research subject. There were photos of my notes from high school, transcriptions of emails I'd sent to counselors, even screenshots of old essays with annotations in the margins. Her handwriting, underlining phrases with notes like narcissistic lean or martyr complex. It was like discovering your own autopsy. While still alive, Celia stepped back. She said it was in case you ever hurt yourself or someone else. "That's not protection," I whispered. "That's ammunition." And suddenly, I remembered something. A moment, months earlier, when I'd received a call from a Columbia administrator asking to verify the authenticity of my essays. They'd claimed it was a routine check, but now? Now I saw the fingerprints. I took photos of everything, scanned the files to a secure drive. Every image, every page. Then I put it all back. Exactly how I found it. When my mother returned, I was sitting at the kitchen table. She froze in the doorway. "You're here." I needed to see Dad. She walked in slowly, setting her purse down with practiced grace. "You could have called." I did. A beat passed. Then, "What are you really doing here, Seraphina?" I looked her in the eye. "I found the drawer." Her jaw tightened. "That was for your safety." "No, that was for your story. The one where you're the victim of a difficult daughter." Her voice dropped. "You think I've enjoyed this? I think you've spent years building a case against me in case I ever became someone you couldn't control." She sat down, suddenly exhausted. Or maybe just exposed. "I was trying to protect what little I had left." "Then you should have started with yourself." We didn't raise voices. We didn't cry. It was quieter than that. It was the quiet of things falling apart exactly how they were designed to. 3 weeks after returning to New York, I stepped onto the stage of a quiet auditorium, one of those intimate, ivy-wrapped halls Columbia reserved for small forums. The air inside buzzed, low and expectant. The event was titled Resilience in Silence, a student-led symposium on family estrangement, identity, and autonomy. I had submitted the pitch anonymously. It was accepted without question. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that the story I would share wasn't hypothetical. It was a test run for truth. I opened with facts, not anecdotes, not tears. Just this. Sometimes survival looks like silence. And sometimes silence is how abuse hides. I didn't name names. I didn't point fingers. But I let the details bleed through. A child's essay rewritten. Scholarships siphoned off. A file cabinet full of secrets. A mother who archived her daughter like a threat. The crowd shifted. Leaned in. In the front row, Professor Mendez met my eyes and gave the slightest nod. I continued. Abusers don't always scream. Sometimes they smile. They call it concern. They call it just in case. Someone in the back let out a breath too loud to be casual. That was when I knew. It wasn't just my story anymore. Afterward, students approached me. Quiet, careful, grateful. One girl with tear-lined eyes pressed a note into my hand. Thank you for saying it first. It wasn't fame. It was clarity. Power, not in being seen, but in being understood. The next day, a journalist from the campus paper reached out. Would you be open to sharing your story for a feature on generational trauma and academic performance? I paused, then said, yes, but I want it published as a composite. Blend mine with others. This isn't about me, it's about the system. We worked for days. When the article went live, it gained traction fast. Students reposted. Professors quoted it in lectures. Alumni groups sent donations to mental health funds. And then I got a message from Celia. Mom thinks you're ruining her life on purpose. She's spiraling. Dad tried to step in. They're talking lawyers. Just so you know, I didn't give them your schedule. My chest tightened. It wasn't fear. It was anticipation. I had expected the backlash. I had prepared for the storm. What I didn't expect was who called next. My father. Seraphina, he said, voice thinner than I remembered. I read the article. I waited. I know you didn't name us, but you didn't have to. I didn't do this to you, I said calmly. You stood by while it happened. A long silence. Then, what do you want from us? I nearly laughed. Nothing, I replied. That's the point. The courtroom wasn't real, not legally, but it was real in every other sense. Public, emotional, undeniable. The venue was a filmed roundtable hosted by a nonprofit on intergenerational family estrangement. The theme, reclaiming the narrative. I was the keynote speaker, invited after the campus article went viral. I had said yes, not for revenge, but for resonance. Still, as I sat backstage and watched the audience file in, some with notepads, others with heavy eyes, I felt my pulse tighten. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the memory of being silenced. Then Mateo appeared. You ready? He asked gently, handing me a bottle of water. No, I admitted, but I'm here. He smiled. That's louder. The stage lights came up, and I told the story, not line by line, not from the beginning, but from the fracture. I think the hardest part isn't being forgotten, I said. It's being remembered incorrectly. It's when people decide who you are, without ever asking you. I spoke of parents who weaponized silence, of a sister who stole stories, of a girl who once thought she had to shrink to survive. I didn't name my mother, or my father, or Celia, but they were all there, between the syllables. Somewhere in the middle of the talk, my phone buzzed. A message from Celia. She's hiring a private investigator. She says you're not done yet. I told her I wouldn't help. She thinks I've turned on her. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. The spotlight was on me now, and it was mine to shape. After the talk, a producer approached me. We'd love to feature you in a docuseries, something long-form, real stories from survivors. We think you could anchor a season. I paused. It wasn't what I came for. But maybe it was what came for me. The days that followed moved fast. My inbox flooded. interview requests, book inquiries, students reaching out, thanking me for saying what they couldn't. But the most unexpected message came in an envelope. Handwritten, postmarked Indiana. My mother. I opened it slowly. Seraphina, I watched. I don't agree with how you painted me, but I see now that you needed to speak. Maybe I wasn't the mother you wanted. Maybe I tried to manage instead of love. I don't know how to fix it, but I won't stop you anymore. Mom, it wasn't an apology, but it was surrender. Weeks passed, then months. I graduated early, launched a podcast, published an op-ed in the Washington Post about inherited silence. And then, on a cool spring evening, I stood on a stage in Brooklyn, about to give the keynote at a National Youth Mental Health Summit. The lights dimmed. I stepped to the mic, paused, then said, I am not a survivor of my family. I'm a survivor of the stories they tried to write over me. I've learned that healing doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like finally walking away without explaining yourself. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home or had your truth rewritten by people who claim to love you, know this: your story still belongs to you. You have the right to reclaim it, rewrite it, and rise from it. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like someone else tried to narrate your life? What did you do to take it back? If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from or how this story resonated with you. And hey, if it didn't speak to you, I'd still love to know why. We grow through conversation. If this video reached you in any way, consider subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss the next story waiting to be told.